listeners. My name is Scandoose. This is episode number 6 of our head-to-head series, and I'm joined by the legendary, one of the dopest on the mic and behind the boards with the production as well. London's own, the one and only Funky DL. Welcome to the show, sir. How you doing?
I'm doing very well, man. Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate this, mate.
Good man. So we've had this album on repeat, man. It's definitely one of our favorites of the year so far. So
Right.
I felt it was important to reach out to you, man, and let's talk about it. Let's get behind the scenes on this project. And obviously, it's a celebration of your career as well, and obviously being the first recognized UK hip hop artist to reach the milestone of releasing 20 solo albums.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that in itself is an amazing accomplishment, man. But for our first question, we're going to take it back to the beginning, man. For those who are listening, I might not be too familiar. Uh, what would you say was the origin of the name Funky DL? And was it your first hip hop?
Um. So I got that name back in second when I was in secondary school. It was just something that I came up with primarily because I used to listen to like A Tribe Called Quest, De La Soul, the Jungle Brothers, all of that sound, and it had a certain funkiness to it. Do you know what I mean? It was quite. It wasn't the same as NWA and BDP and all of that. There was a funk to it. Do you know what I mean? And so I just um, put the name, Funky DL together based on the funk element of the music that I liked. And the DL just stands for Deaf Lyrics because when I was in school, there were a few guys in my year that were rappers, but I always felt like I had the dopest lyrics or the deafest lyrics. Deaf is pretty much kind of an old school word, an 80s word, Def Jam, and you know what I mean, so deaf and all of that.
Mhm.
So I just thought, yeah, Funky DL, and it just kind of stuck. You know what I mean?
Nice, man. So you talk about your early influences. How would you describe your journey into obviously listening to hip hop to actually becoming a hip hop artist and obviously working on your first songs?
Um, I mean, I started extremely early. I I listened to hip hop. I was actually into bashment music, or dancehall as they call it. Back in the 80s. So I used to listen to Papa San and Lieutenant Stitchie and all of these guys. Really, really old school guys, veterans of the game.
Mm,
This is when I was like 8 years old. 7, 8, 9 years old, and it wasn't until I hit like about 11 that I started to listen to rap, and the first hip hop I was exposed to, or rap I was exposed to, was like the Fat Boys, then started to listen to Schoolie D and KRS One and Special Ed and Biz Markie. But
mm,
I wasn't like a huge fan of what any one particular artist. I was just listening.
mm,
What I liked about it was the storytelling element of it. KRS One had Love's Gonna Get Ya,
mm,
Biz Markie had the Pick the Boogers, and Special Ed had the Mission, and these were all
mm,
stories, and I liked how these stories unfolded with rhymes. But it wasn't until I heard the Jungle Brothers, um, which was Straight Out the Jungle, was the first album they did, came out I think in '88.
mm,
When I heard that, it was just like I said, a funk to it, to some of the samples that they were using. I didn't know they were samples at the time.
mm,
And then that kind of led me to listen to Tribe and that whole Native Tongues family. No, De La was next actually. So 3 Feet High and Rising came out in '89. That was like the first album I ever bought.
mm,
Um, and then, People's Instinctive Travels came out in 1990. And by the time I heard that first Tribe album, that De La album, I was hooked. And
mm,
then, as we all know as hip hop fans, the albums that then came next from Tribe and De La, like De La Soul is Dead and The Low End Theory, was just like, what's going on? Do you know what I mean? It was just
yeah,
crazy. So by the time I got to albums like Midnight Marauders now, it was a wrap. It was over. Like I don't know, 1993, I might have been around 14 years old, 13,
mm,
14. And
mm,
I decided this is what I want to do. It was just that addictive, the kind of music that they were making. And
mm.
so I decided that that's what I want to do, man. And that's kind of how I got my start. To making my first song, I mean, what do you call your first song? I was like 12 maybe, in secondary school, and I remember doing a song. I wrote this song called like Friday the 13th, and it was just a story of things just going wrong, you know. And I performed it in school assembly. I was really shy. I was just looking at the floor the whole time. But it was nice to see that my whole year group was like 180 pupils. When I finished performing, like everyone just clapped and cheered, and that was really encouraging because I was frightened, you know. So that was kind of the first song I wrote. First song I recorded was a song called a litter rap. It was a competition for Walker's Crisps.
Okay.
In school, and you know, we had to write this rap about not throwing litter on the floor, and so I wrote this rap and I composed the beat and we sent it off, and it didn't win, but you know, that was like the first song that I made, but obviously not anything that was ever released. You know?
So we got to thank Walker's Crisps for the start of the career, basically. Man, so you said you produced the beat, man. So what was like the early software that you was using or hardware when you was?
Okay, so what it was when I started secondary school, my English teacher actually was quite encouraging. You know, I used to do a comprehension English work, and I used to write it in rhyme form and then rap it to the class. So she took me up to the music department, and as this was like maybe the first week of school, first or second week of school, I had never been up to the music department. So she took me up there and she introduced me to the teachers and said that this kid's got something special, like he writes, you know. And so I, in getting to know the teachers, they started booking me into after school keyboard sessions, and that's where I learned. There was a program, I think it was called Pro 24. It was a sequencing program, you know, much like Cubase. And they also had Cubase. So I learned Pro 24 and Cubase, just the basics up in school. And then they had Casio keyboards, and I began to understand how MIDI worked, you know, how these machines were speaking to each other, you know, through a language, a code called MIDI, and I'd press the button here and it'd be recorded on the computer. So that was kind of like my humble beginnings, but I was always kind of disappointed in the music department because the Casio keyboards, the sounds were just played out. You know what I mean? You press like a demo for hip hop and it would just have this played out hip hop beat that wasn't even really hip hop. So I was still intrigued of how do I get that kind of sound that I heard on the De La and I heard on the Tribe, and I was so young, I didn't know what a sampler was. Our school didn't have a sampler, so it was always like, why am my beats not sounding like, you know, kind of rugged and raw? But you grow and you learn. So that was kind of the beginning, the start.
Yeah. So how would you, like, going forward from there? How did you manage to get your beats sounding polished and you know, to a professional level that you was happy with?
So it was a transition. So from school, fortunately, my uncle, my mum's younger brother, had a recording studio in his house, which was quite rare for anyone to have. You know, you're talking about the early to mid 90s. To have a fully fledged studio in your house was not, you know, popular. So he had one, and he never had a sampler. But I think by like the mid 90s, about 93, 94, about 94, I learned what sampling was all about. And I purchased, I think in 95, I purchased a Commodore Amiga, and it had this sampling package called Pro Tracker on it, which allowed you to sample in 8-bit quality and for a very short period of time. But then you could take records and, you know, start looping things up and chopping things up. And so I was messing around with that. But then my uncle got this Akai S1100 sampler. And I really wanted to learn how to use it. I knew what it could do, but I just didn't know how to use it. And so I used to go in the studio and just study it and study it and study it. And it, you know, it didn't have these great visual displays that these samplers have now, you know. So you had to do a lot of things by ear. When you were trying to chop samples, you had to kind of twist the wheel and just listen. Is it in the right place? And so on and so forth. So that's kind of how I learned it. And then, you know, eventually, from my uncle's studio, and then getting signed to Rondo Publishing and Almo Sounds and having access to their studio. They had an S1100, and then the engineer told me about the MPC, and I eventually went out and got one. And, you know, so it was kind of a transition from different models, from no sampler to a Commodore Amiga sampler to the S1100, where you couldn't really see much, and then, you know, eventually the MPC, and then obviously today there's a plethora.
Yeah, yeah,
of
yeah.
samplers out there, you know.
Yeah, and I know you're still loyal to the MPC, right? Because I see one in the background there. So that's
Yeah,
good.
that one, it's actually it works, but I don't really use it. I got two. I got another one in front of me, which you can't see, which is the Renaissance.
Mm,
I don't really use either of them that much, to be honest,
okay.
because I just have a different way of programming now. I kind of do things directly in I use Cubase, so
Mm.
sometimes I use Logic, but mostly Cubase.
Oh, it's
So
still on the PC. Still
yeah,
Cubase. Okay.
yeah, I use Cubase on the PC.
Mm,
So I have a PC and a Mac, and two screens next to each other. And I on the Cubase, I normally just drag samples in, and then
mm,
start cutting and chopping and placing things where I want them to be. I find that to make the music in a machine and then having to export that from a machine to another machine, and I just don't like working with too many different bits and pieces.
okay.
I like to have everything all in one place, and so then when I save it and when I back up, everything's just in one place. I don't got to figure out, oh, it's configured in this way on that machine and it's configured in that way in this machine.
Mm.
So yeah, I just kind of I use them very rarely, mostly to pitch things and loop things and then throw them into Cubase.
Okay. So tell us about the obviously, because I noticed looking at your history, the process between you coming from your uncle's studio to being signed to winning a mobile, it seemed to happen in quite a short period. So how did you manage to get from that point to just honing your craft in your uncle's studio to actually being signed to a record deal?
It's funny when you say that, because it was a short period when you look at it in terms of my age, and yeah, it wasn't that long. But at the same time, I tell people there is a backstory. Like, I got signed and won a mobile at
Mm,
age 19,
yeah.
but I had been pursuing music since 12.
Mm,
So there's a 7-year backstory to everything that I was trying to do. Obviously, I was too young to enter into, the music industry as a 12-year-old. I still had to go through school and GCSEs. But it
mm,
wasn't like I just came out of nowhere and then bam, things happened for me. I was in pursuit since I was like 12, 13.
mm,
And so what happened was, I left school in 94. I was
mm,
16 years old in the summer of 94.
mm,
And what happened was, I just used to go to my uncle's studio and make demos. I was also doing work experience at the studio in Tottenham, and they just had me making tea and sweeping up for
mm,
months on end. Like, I was told when I got there, it'd be like 2-3 months, and then you start to put your hands on some of the equipment, and but they never let me touch anything. And the thing is, the worst thing about it is they knew that I
mm,
knew stuff about these machines, but they just had me open and close the studio,
mm,
uh, make tea, coffee, sweep up, clean equipment, the insides of equipment. I remember having these kind of metal type scouring pads that I had to, sand or clean rust off of equipment, and I'd get metal splinters in my fingers.
mm,
So I had enough of that after about 6 months. They wasn't going to let me do anything. So that was like in 95. And then I just kind of went back into focusing on demos in my uncle's studio. By the time we got to the end of 95, like towards the autumn, I
mm,
had made this song called 1221, and I sent it into Westwood, Max and Dave, and DJ 279. And 279 was the first one to play it. And
mm,
then the others followed suit like the following week.
mm,
So all of a sudden, I've gone from a kid who's making demos in my uncle's studio to now having one of my songs played off a cassette
mm,
on like the 3 biggest hip hop shows in London. Do you know what I mean?
mm,
And so that was, Numbers 279 invited me up on his show in October of 95. I did my first radio interview. And then, I kind of coasted through 96, making more demos, sending more stuff to radio, entering the Foster's Eyes competition on Kiss FM, and it won that. And then by the time we got to mid to late 96, I was offered a deal. I mean, yeah, things happened quite fast.
mm,
But it's because I think with me, I also had just this go-get-it attitude. Like, anything to do with my pursuit of music, that's what I was on. That's where my focus was at. So I actually got offered 2 deals before I took the deal that I got. I got offered a deal with Diesel Records,
mm,
which was a record label based in, the independent record label based in Hackney, who had released Cruise. I think Cruise were quite a popular R&B, British R&B group at the time.
Okay.
And Celicia as well was signed to them. And then they offered me like a production deal, which was 2 years signed exclusively, no release commitment, no money, just in the studio for 2 years to see what you come out with. And I was like, no, I ain't gonna do that exclusively. Turned that down. And then I got offered a deal by a label called Proceed Entertainment. And they offered me a 2-album deal. First album, no money, put it out, see what happens. If it does okay, second album, you get a couple of grand as an advance. And I said, nah, that don't sound good to me. So I turned that down. And then by the time we got to late 96, that's where I got offered a single deal, which then turned into a 5-album deal with Almo Sounds and Rondo Publishing, which was a big, they were a big company. And that's kind of, so late 96 is when I started recording my first album, and it came out by 97. So that's kind of the lineage,
Nice. And obviously off the back of that, man, you said you won the award, and then you started touring, right? Outside the UK?
No, not immediately. So basically, I was doing a lot of stuff in the UK. I remember performing in everywhere from Brighton to Bristol to Sheffield to, we were doing London, we were doing everywhere. And just the one-off shows, weren't getting paid for them, trying to get on the supports and so on and so forth. Then I won MOBO in 97. I actually went to Australia in 97 as well, but that was prior to MOBO. Did a show out there and some DJ bits and whatnot, and it was cool, but it wasn't anything that special. After winning MOBO, it was still I was still very much UK based, everything was UK. I did a couple shows, big shows. So I remember doing the Choice FM 8th birthday bash. That was in 97. That was before MOBO, but that was like supporting Destiny's Child.
All right.
They had just come out with No. So it was a big deal. And I remember 279 saying it's the first time Choice FM have ever put a UK rapper on a bill like this. Do you know what I mean? So did that show. The next year I did a Casey and JoJo support Equinox, and 99 I was doing Eminem at Astoria, and Eminem again in 2000. And then I think it was when things started taking off for me at the end of 99, 2000 in Japan. I started to then go overseas and really tour, 11 city tour, 7 city tour. So that's how it went down.
That's incredible, man, and that's how you came to a lot of our attention as well. Hearing stories about you outselling all the US artists in Japan, and obviously being the biggest UK artist outside of the UK at the time as well. And obviously, what was that? Briefly, let's talk about that experience of obviously being a UK artist in Japan. A lot of the time, the first time they ever heard a UK hip hop artist, because probably in their mind they probably thought it was only American artists that made hip hop, and touring Japan, and obviously being a big artist in Japan as well, in terms of your sales. And what was that experience like for you?
I mean, it was phenomenal. It was out of this world, man. It's something that when you speak about it, people marvel, but people really had to have been there to see it. You know what I mean? Because it's mad. Because sometimes people see me in the UK and they kind of think that sometimes I almost get looked at as like a struggling artist. You know what I'm saying? Because they don't really see what happens in places that they haven't been. Do you know what I mean? And I remember having a colleague of mine come out to Japan, and he came to a show of mine, and he was just like, whoa. Because I remember going into the club and we had to walk through the crowd, and people were just grabbing. They were trying to grab me by the collar and so on and so forth. And it was just nuts. And I've done shows in Japan where I remember going on stage. I'm due to go on stage at like 1 o'clock in the morning, and I've come to the backstage area like 5 minutes to 1, and the promoters turned around and said to me that you can't go on yet. And I'm like, why? And he's like, because there's a queue of people outside that's going all around the block still to come in. And I'm like, but it's already full. Do you know what I mean? So it was nuts. It was just absolutely nuts. And I never took it for granted ever, because I understood that I came from a place where at the time,
Mm.
UK rap wasn't, it was a struggle. It wasn't this celebrated thing. Do you know what I'm saying? It was really a struggle. And that most, if not all, other artists back home would give their right arm to experience what I was experiencing, you know? So it was something that I never took for granted, you know. I remember doing these shows and it was work, you know. You come off stage and you be signing autographs for like a couple hours, man. And then heading back to the hotel, getting very little sleep, up in the morning, checking out new city, airplanes, transit vans. By the time you settle in the new city, have something to eat, go back to the hotel, time for sound check, do your sound check, come back to the hotel, sleep a little bit, get up, prepare for the show, go do the show, autographs again, and you're just doing the same routine, you know what I mean, every day. So couple breaks that we got. So it was phenomenal. It was out of this world, and to have had that experience and to be part of the Japanese hip hop culture in a sense is just unbelievable.
And did it ever cross your mind to be like, you know what, I'm just happy to be exclusively a Japanese hip hop artist and just forget the UK market?
No, it wasn't. The thing is, for me, I always felt like forget the UK industry.
Okay.
I always knew that I had fans in the UK who adored what I did. Do you know what I mean? And loved what I did. And I didn't want to be like, yeah, F the UK, when there are consumers and people who have always supported. Do you know what I mean? They've always been down with the cause. But I always felt like when it came to things like the publications and some of the radio stations and just the politics of, I didn't like the UK industry. I didn't like how they made it so difficult, you know, and I didn't like the importance that a lot of the so-called gatekeepers felt like they had. You know, I didn't like the way it was managed, and it didn't feel like there was much camaraderie, you know, amongst us as artists, and also just the industry as well. Like it's very difficult to speak to someone like Tim Westwood. Do you know what I mean? It's very, even now, it's very difficult to have a conversation with Giles Peterson. Like just to have a conversation. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like, I just felt like, yeah, man, it's too much. It's too much to go up against. And a lot of the artists from that era, that 90s era, I mean, we were the ones who were almost trying to fight the good fight. You know, when you see the guys, the Gigs and Storms, and these guys are basically, and I commend them because they're doing their thing, but they're able to taste the fruit that we couldn't taste.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I never felt like to turn my back completely on the UK, but I just felt like I need to be wherever success allows me to breed what I'm doing. Do you know what I mean?
Okay. And around that time, is that when you decided to start your own label, Washington Classics, or, you know, and what was the reason behind starting your own imprint?
So it's funny, when I started Washington Classics, I actually started that in '97. That was the year that I got signed.
Oh, okay.
And I made it clear to the label and to the A&R team there that I had this ethos of making so much music, and I wanted to try different things. So they allowed me to freely press a couple of projects and put them out. I wasn't a, you know, even though I was 97 and they had signed me, I wasn't this big deal yet. So they allowed me to press a couple of bits and pieces, and also they kind of said, well, look, you got a publishing deal, so the stuff that you record and press will still fall under the publishing contract, but you have the freedom to press your record and whatnot. And so, and plus the record deal was quite short-lived anyway. So, so yeah, something just said to me, you should try your hand at putting out music. And I think also, I didn't like, let me put this on silent, sorry, man. And also, I didn't like I didn't like the control
Yeah.
that I was beginning to see some of these labels will have. Do you know what I mean? I didn't like. I was very cooperative as an artist, but I could just see that there's going to be times when I want to do something and I'm going to have to compromise. And so I want to have an imprint where I could just do what I want. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's why I started it. And then I think after releasing a few records, first couple of records didn't sell that great because I was still making my way. By the time we got to 99, I released this record and I think it sold something like 3,000 units in the first week, which wasn't huge. But when I saw the money that was coming back off that, do you know what I mean? Because it was like 6-7 grand off the first shipment that was going to come back to me. And, you know, we're talking about late 90s and I'm still a teenager, you know, like 19 or coming on to 20. Like, that's a whole heap of money. And then that made me see that actually there's a business model out of what I'm doing. If I can learn, I can learn every area that I need to navigate and know how to deal with everything, then I can turn this into something where I never have to answer to any label, you know? So it's kind of how it started.
So it sounds like it was important to you to have a grasp on the music business from early, rather than just go with the flow.
Yeah, very, very important because like I said, you know, when I referred to earlier to being offered those 2 deals before, I remember the first deal with Diesel was a production deal. And I remember going to the office once. They had given me the contract and I'd taken it to a couple of people, music industry heads, to look at.
Yeah.
These people had written some notes on the contract of what wasn't that good and what, you know, wasn't that favorable. I've gone back to these when I was, you know, this time I'm like, I don't know, 17, 18. And I'm in their office.
Yeah.
And the MD, I remember saying to him, yeah, like I've had the contract looked at and these are my issues with it. And this guy started shouting at me in his office. Do you know what I mean?
Wow.
He just went berserk, like almost like, who are you to come into my office and tell me that the contract that I presented to you isn't good enough for you? Do you know what I mean? And I remember leaving his office that day saying that I would never set foot back in this place again for any reason.
Yeah.
And I never did. I never did. I just felt like I almost felt violated, like I should allow someone to take advantage of me. Do you know what I'm saying? So even from that experience, and then the second one that I mentioned about the 2-album deal and only getting some money on your second album, I just felt like it felt very exploitative. Do you know what I mean? You felt like everyone was saying, I want you.
Yeah.
But they weren't willing to put anything up immediately or initially to secure you. And so I just realized early that I'm going to need to learn a lot, because otherwise, if I'm always going to be in these relationships with other labels and other entities, then it's not going to serve me great. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So I could see that from early.
Okay, right. So I mean, judging on your journey in your career, man, up until this point, what would Funky Dio of today advise Funky Dio on back then, of how you should navigate, or was you happy with the journey?
I think I've always said this, like, and I think it's good to be able to speak from a place where, as you've kind of implied, where you've kind of done something right, rather than having made a whole lot of mistakes and then you would have to advise your younger self to do it differently from how you did it. I think what my advice would be, not to only my younger self, but to anybody getting into the music business, is to learn how to become as self-sufficient as possible. We all hear those sayings that no man's an island and all of that kind of stuff, and that there's only so much you can achieve on your own. That's true. However, there is a huge amount that you can achieve on your own, more than you probably could ever think of. Yeah. And so when you learn to become self-sufficient, you know, for me, I had to learn the process of pressing records and process of pressing CDs,
Mm.
process of exporting records and distribution, the process of shipping, because I would ship stuff directly from me to record companies in Japan.
Mm.
You know, and so you had to fill out all these custom sheets and these tax sheets and all of this information. Obviously, you're doing your tax returns, and then you're looking at licensing deals I was doing in Japan. So now, how does the licensing agreement work? And looking at the contracts and the kind of terms and stipulations to these deals in different territories. But I was willing to learn the entire landscape, and therefore, I think my advice was to become as self-sufficient as possible.
So that means self-sufficient in a sense. You could like do this music thing full time as well, and I imagine obviously of your status in this industry, you would have been receiving a lot of offers from producers. They'd be sending you beats and that. But what made you make the decision to primarily produce yourself and obviously mix, and you master yourself as well?
Yeah.
Mix and master yourself as well.
Well, again, I think I always had a kind of an inquisitiveness about me to how do I do something? If someone else knows how to do something and I don't know how to do it, then I'm always going to have to rely on that somebody else.
Mm.
And I always kind of felt like everything around me moves too slow. Do you know what I mean? I just always felt like everything around me moves too slow. So in order for me to move on my clock, then I was going to have to figure out how to do certain things. I mean, I started making beats when it wasn't something that I did because, it was something I did that because I loved the process of it. I loved it. But I remember working with a rap crew from Hackney called 12 Stone. And 12 Stone were some guys that were in my school. They were in my secondary school, but they were a bit older than me. It's funny because in my secondary school, I went to Kingsland Secondary School in East London, near Dalston.
Yeah.
And Kingsland, so 12 Stone were there, but actually Kalashnikov was there as well. So there was kind of like a bunch of us guys who were doing our thing. But I remember teaming up with 12 Stone, and without me saying anything disparaging about those guys, because they're cool guys, but our working relationship never panned out. It never really worked out. But while I was in that group, I just felt like everything was being held up. It was always just too slow because I've got to wait on this one or wait on that one, and then what ended up happening was I didn't really like being in that group because I didn't feel like an equal in that group. Do you know what I mean? Because those guys were older as well and they had formed a group before me. Do you know what I mean? So I didn't feel like an equal in that group. I didn't feel like I was treated. So I just said that, you know what, I'm going to break out and do my own thing as a solo artist. And I remember going into my uncle's studio the very next time I went in and saying to myself, actually, now that I'm here, I don't need anyone else in the room. Like I know how to engineer, I know how to produce, and I know how to rap. Who else do I need? Do you know what I'm saying? So it was that kind of ethos that I learned from young, like to just figure out how to do as much as you can so that you don't need to rely on people. Now that doesn't mean that if you know how to do something, you shouldn't hire someone else to do it. I hire people to do artwork for me. I can do artwork, do you know what I'm saying? But I want the very best for that project. So there's certain people that I might designate to say, although I can do this, you can do this better. Do you know what I'm saying? Or maybe I have too much responsibilities. But so when I say about being self-sufficient, it isn't because you're then gonna set out and prepare to do everything. It's to be in a position to be able to do something should you not be able to find someone who can do it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it was for me. It was just like, yeah, man, I when it came to production, I was just like, yeah, this is something I love doing and I want to do it. And then I started to form my sound, and I was like, yeah, this sound is very special to me. Like, it's not something that I feel like I can just go to any producer and get what I want musically. And so it just took shape like that.
Yeah, and one thing I noticed about your sound when I'm looking back over your albums, man, it's definitely a sound that ages very well.
Mm.
I was even just listening to Blackcurrant Jazz as well today. I was just like, yeah, this sounds fresh now as it did when it was released, man. So spanning your albums, how would you say your sound has evolved over the years?
I think I've definitely become way more diverse. Like Classic Was the Day. My first album was very very jazz led,
Mm,
and although I've kept that theme in a lot of my music going forward, I've I think I've been able to put in some places a twist on what I'm able to do as a
mm,
producer. So an example of that would be The Fourth Quarter. The Fourth Quarter was an album where I said, okay, I'm not going to do an album that's based on jazz samples for the whole album. I'm going to do an album that has 4 different styles of hip hop. So on that album, I have the authentic quarter where the stuff is a bit more rugged and raw.
mm,
I have the jazz quarter, which obviously is the stuff that's jazzy. I then have the soul quarter where I'm leaning more into soul samples. And then
mm.
I have the new age quarter, which is kind of stuff that's a bit more spacey and airy. Do you know what I mean? And so I think as I've come along as a producer, my ability to then experiment and lean into different directions has become more and more apparent. But there's a part of that I still try to keep a trademark sound to.
Yeah.
So, I mean, right now I've got some music that I'm kind of putting together that all has like a 70s Motown feel.
Mm,
So if I was to do, a project with that, it would sound very different to the 20 album because the 20 album doesn't have the 70s
mm.
Motown feel. Do you know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
yeah.
So, so yeah, I've played about and experimented. I've also incorporated a lot of live instruments with
Mm,
my music, whereas back in like the early days there was none of that. So I
yeah.
had a slew of albums where it was just samples and samples and samples. Whereas when you get to Denison Point was a mixture of samples being embellished with live instruments, and then you get to the Def album
Mm,
of I think last year was Def, and
mm,
Def had no samples in it whatsoever. Do you know what I'm saying?
mm.
In terms of all the music was all live played. Do you know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
and then we get to that on the 20 album as well. The first 4 tracks on 20 have no breaks. Do you know what I'm saying? So yeah, there's been an evolution in the way that I put music together since I started all the way up until now.
Yeah, man, and I see you keep challenging yourself. I want to ask you one more question before we solely focus on the new album. So for a new listener that's trying to get into Funky DL, your catalog, what 5 albums from your catalog would you recommend for someone to check out first before they dig deeper?
That's a hard question to answer, is merely because who is the new listener? Is it someone young? Is it someone old? You know what I'm
Okay.
saying?
Okay.
If it was a younger person, I would say definitely 20.
Yeah.
20 has, those trap hits and so on and so forth.
Mm.
But if I was to just let's say you're asking it as a blanket general question, I
Yeah,
would say
let's say the listener just wants to get the true essence or the very best of Funky DL. What would they need to listen to?
I think they should listen to, that's a tough one. Classic Was the Day,
Yeah.
Blackcurrant Jazz 2,
Mm-hmm.
Denison Point.
Okay.
That's 3, right?
Yeah.
Classic Was the Day, Blackcurrant Jazz 2, Denison Point.
Mm-hmm.
I was then going to say Life After Denison, but nah, I'll leave that one out. The Fourth Quarter
Yeah.
and 20.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Nice.
those 5.
Okay. So I know this is probably going to be an obvious question where like I'd ask you why name this album 20, but clearly because it's your 20th album. But what would you say is the concept and creative direction behind this album?
So the album was, when I did the album, I kind of said to myself, I want to do something that just feels more celebratory, like something that is fun. There's nothing that's too deep. Like, you know, lyrically, it doesn't go too deep throughout the album. I mean, Dennis and Point was very autobiographical. And so there's a lot of deeper and meaningful things being said across the album. Same with Autonomy. Actually, Autonomy I would have liked to put in that 5 actually, but
we honorable mention.
Yeah, honorable mention is Autonomy, but yeah, that it was lyrically it was supposed to just be playful. It's supposed to be fun, but also my intention was to show my creative diversity. You know, the album, the way the album runs is deliberate. That the first 4 tracks are the non-sample stuff. Do you know what I mean? So there's an energy and a vibe that you get into for the first 4 tracks. And then it kind of goes more into, because the first 4 are like, they're kind of more laid back, still pacey, but they kind of laid back and kind of sound sweet sounding. Then it gets more into that boom bap sound. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
With Truth Be Told and Pieces of the Thesis. And then it kind of moves into this trap era where, you know, you've got Trilogy and I Wasn't Born in the Summer and Think Twice. And then it comes back out more into a boom bap field. So I kind of wanted to take people on a journey of just of the diversity that I have as a producer and as a rapper, to be able to make these sub-genres of hip hop and to be able to fit comfortably on them all. Do you know what I mean? And to not make an album that sounds one-dimensional, like I'm just doing one thing the whole way through. Yeah. So that was kind of the sole purpose of 20. It's almost like saying, after 20 albums, look what I can do. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And one of the most impressive things for me on this album is literally how fresh you sound, especially going against some of the younger artists that you've got. Like, I don't know if I'm saying the name correctly, but Ep.6. Yeah, the female lyricist as well. And then just hearing you alongside Steve Mowgli, you know, it's just the chemistry is tight, you know. And one thing I wanted to know from you is like, what keeps you so like inspired and driven, man, to keep performing at such a high level?
It's music, man. It's just music. Like, you know, music has always been, to me, like, it's been a lot of things. It's been a lifeline. It's been an anchor. It's more than just music to me, you know. Someone recently asked me, why do I do what I do? Why do you do what you do? Why at this point do you still continue to do what you do? And I said I have a multitude of answers for that question. And so I do what I do because, number one, I'm good at what I do. Number two, I enjoy what I do. Number three, if I weren't to do what I would do, I would be unhappy. I know that. I know I wouldn't be happy if I wasn't making music. I do what I do because I make a living from what I do, and I need to make a living. Do you know what I mean? I do what I do because it inspires other people. It gives other people enjoyment. Do you know what I'm saying? I do what I do because by doing what I do, I'm able to offer other people opportunities. There's a plethora of reasons why I do what I do, and combined, those are the reasons why I continue. Do you know what I'm saying? Plus probably more reasons I haven't mentioned. But it's a multi-pronged answer. Do you know what I mean? There's so many reasons why I just keep doing it.
And one thing I like about this album as well is that you seem to have a good air of discovering new artists. Now, I mean, obviously, based on your experience, you could have more or less asked anybody established to jump on this album, but you've gone with some newer artists that we may not be too familiar with. Was that?
Yeah.
Do you do that on purpose? Was that?
Yeah, because I felt like look, I'm almost like, you know, I'm this artist that's been around for a long time. So let's take, for example, LMC. LMC's on the song 20 AD. It's the final track of the album.
Okay.
And when I asked him to be on that track, I kind of felt like it's a track where I'm talking about being 20 albums deep. That's what 20 AD stands for, 20 albums deep. Actually, and LMC has released a few bits and pieces. He's been doing his thing, but he's quietly trying to raise the stakes in his career. I said to him, I want you to be on that track because even though it's a celebration of me being an artist 20 albums deep, I think that it's important to actually bring someone who's a newer and fresher face to kind of almost tell like his side of what he would feel like to be in that position. So rather than the song just having this one perspective of like, I've arrived at this point, maybe to have someone who hasn't arrived at that point to speak on what it would be like for them to get to that place. Do you know what I'm saying? And so for me, it was really, really important to definitely put people on there based on their ability and not based on their name. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's funny because I remember a couple of years ago, I can't remember what album I was doing, maybe Black Current Jazz 3. I was doing that album and I had this distributor suggest to me to get all of these people to feature on my album. And I just never heard of them. I didn't know who they were. And it was more based on, because that you could lean into their following. And it's like, yeah, I don't really care about all of that. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't really care. Like, I'm now at the place where when I connect with other artists, it's because I feel like there's something there. Like me and Steve Mowgli, we've worked together. We've, hung out. We're friends. You know what I'm saying? LMC and Teddy Reese, we've worked together in another capacity other than just them featuring on my album. So I've got to know who they are. Abiosa, I've got to know who they are. We may not be super close, but we know things about each other and we've been around each other in another capacity to then be able to say less work. And that's what I like more. It feels more natural. It feels more organic, that you make a connection with people and then you work with them rather than just pulling random people, So yeah, that's kind of how that came about. And it's funny you said what you said about, because everyone in that album is in their 20s, more or less. I think Diana Farron is in her 30s, but everybody else is in their 20s. And I'm actually 42 now. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's mad, like, for me to say, yeah, I have to go toe to toe with people that are, a lot more fresh and maybe in some cases more hungry. Do you know what I mean?
Of course, man. So we're besides getting Funky Dio the MC and Funky Dio the producer, we're also getting Funky Dio the A&R now. So
yeah, in some ways, yeah.
So we're kind of getting a peek into the future maybe of Washington Classics and where you go next.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it's weird because I have these guys feature on my album, and we're all talking about the possibilities of what we can do beyond just an album feature, because it isn't just about get you on my album and then be done with it, So Songer, for example, Abiosa, we've all had conversations about what we could do next, but I've always tried to make it clear. I'm working with an artist right now in the Bronx, New York, and we're planning to release some stuff. We've got like 5 tracks finished already. We're looking to put out some stuff next year. But it isn't necessarily going to come out on Washington Classics, because what I'm trying to do with these artists is show them that I want you to be in the position that I'm in. I don't want you to be underneath me, and then in terms of finding out how much money you've made off your music, I have to report to you. And do you know what I mean? I want you to be able to be in the position where you are facilitating your releases and there's no one behind the curtain. Do you know what I mean? So as far as music coming out on Washington Classics, that may not happen, but what Washington Classics may do is facilitate other artists to empower themselves. You know what I mean?
So in terms of your personal artistry, because on this album you sound as fresh as you've ever been. Like, you don't even sound like you're anywhere near the climax of your career yet. So is there So what else is there for you to achieve? What else do you want to accomplish in your career?
Um, that's a hard question because sometimes I feel like I've accomplished so much that where else do I go from here? And I think there's different ways you can want to accomplish. You can want to accomplish creatively, or you can want to accomplish something more externally. Do you know what I mean? Like whether it's riches or status or influence or whatever it is. I think for me, I want to accomplish just newer creative heights. Do you know what I mean? Newer levels as a creative person, and to acquire a greater skill set than I already have. I mean, that's what I've been doing all along the way. I'm actually involved in some house music projects right now. Do you know what I mean? But when I listen to some of the stuff that I'm doing, like, there's no way I could have done that stuff 10 years ago. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's no way I could have done it. The expertise I have and the experience that I have now, it's just supersedes. And so that's what I want, really, is to carry on a trajectory of improving my creative ability. Do you know what I'm saying? But also of definitely of being of service to newer acts as well, whether it's through my experiences and knowledge or information or techniques or contacts or whatever. You know, I recently gave out a whole bunch of media contacts to some up and coming artists. And I remember a friend of mine was like, why would you do that? Why would you give all of your contacts for press and blogs and publications to somebody else? And I said, because it doesn't matter if they have the contacts, they still need to make the dope music. They still need to know how to present themselves to those contacts. So if they don't get those parts right, they're not going to win. So the prize isn't the contacts. The prize is how they then use those contacts to make sure that they step up on point in how they present what they're doing. So I think people can get really, really confused over what's important. Do you know what I mean? And I think what's important is making yourself the best that you can be, and then trying to find where you then fit with that. Do you know what I mean? I've never been afraid of allowing someone to stand next to me or allowing someone to have access to what I have, because I don't believe that someone else's light can come and dim mine. Do you know what I mean? I've never believed that. I believe that my light shines bright, whether I'm standing next to someone brighter or not. It just, so I don't have those fears. Do you know what I mean? And so I will hook people up. I'll help people out. I'll give them, and that's what was done for me early in my career. There were certain key people who said to me, DL, you want to press your own vinyl? Go to this exporter and see if you can sell some there. Go to this one. Here's this contact. Here's that guy. I still needed to make the music. I still needed to press the record. I still needed to deliver it, and I still needed to invoice them, and I still needed to restock. So why would that person say I'm not going to give him the contact? Do you know what I mean? There's still work to do on my side. So I think that's another way that I would, to answer your question, that I see going forward, is to be somewhat of an empowering figure to other people coming up.
Nice. So when it's all said and done, man, what would you want the Funky DL legacy to be, man? What would, when we look back at the record books and we come across Funky DL and we talk about your impact on UK hip hop or global hip hop, let's say?
I just, you know what I would like? I would like my legacy just to be that here was a guy who made music that really gave people some enjoyment. Do you know what I mean? On whatever level it gave them enjoyment. You know, and to be honest, I don't even look forward to then looking back at a legacy, because the legacy is kind of like it's happening as we speak. Like when someone sends me a message and they say to me, "Dear, I'm in Brazil right now and I'm having a little get together at my house and we're all listening to your music," and in that moment I understand that my voice is entertaining people in a place that I've never set foot in.
Yeah.
But my thoughts and feelings and my voice is being heard in that place somewhere geographically, that's my legacy right there.
Mm.
Do you know what I'm saying? That's what I feel like. I feel like that served its purpose, to give people enjoyment in a place that I couldn't geographically get to. Do you know what I'm saying? In person. So for me, it isn't this whole, I want to change the world, or I want to have this massive legacy where I'm remembered as. It's like I want my music to do what it was intended to do, and then it's job done.
Dope, man. So for my final question, I'd want to ask you, for the people that have not heard the album yet, why do they need to go out and get 20?
I think fundamentally, it's the skills, man. 20 is an album where when you listen to it, there's going to be something on there that's going to really grab your attention. You know, it's not an album. I think it'd be an album that anyone would be hard pressed to not like all of it. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's going to be something on there that's you're going to be like really intrigued by. But I think that 20 is also an album which really expresses from all of us on there a certain level of skillmanship as rappers and producers and performers and whatever. I think it expresses a skillmanship, and I think it sets a high standard, a high bar that anyone aspiring to release great music should listen to that album and just listen to how it has come together. And it's funny because the instrumental version just dropped today.
Yeah.
And when you listen to the instrumental version, you will hear, even to a greater degree, the intricacies of the production on that album. Do you know what I mean? So, but I would just say fundamentally, because there's something that's going to capture you and that you're really going to enjoy on the 20 album, because it's such a diverse album. And I think as well, because the focus of the my albums have always been to enrich with melody. Like, melodically, you're going to feel something from one of those songs, even if it's not necessarily from the lyrics or from the vocals, but musically, there's going to be things that happen that will emotively make you move. Do you know what I mean?
Dope, man. So for the people locked in right now and want to stay in touch with you, man, and keep up with you on the socials, what's your handles? How can they reach you?
So people can reach me, if it's Instagram, it's going to be at FunkyDL Hip Hop. So that's just FUNKYDLHIPHOP at FunkyDL Hip Hop. The same for Twitter at FunkyDL Hip Hop. And if it's Facebook, it's Facebook / FunkyDL Official. So that's the main free platforms that I'm on: Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And then, of course, I have my online store, which is just funkydl.com. Go there, there's vinyl, there's CDs, some merchandise up in the store. And and then if anyone wants to reach out to me personally, they can do that through Instagram and the DMs, or they can go to the online store and there's an email they can capture and fill out, and that will get to me.
Incredible, man. And also, besides your albums, you've done some incredible remix albums as well. I remember the Nas one and the Amy Winehouse one that you've done as well.
Yeah.
So there's so much range, man.
Those can be found on Bandcamp. So anyone that goes to, I think it's funkydl.bandcamp.com, and you can find a whole bunch of catalog there. Some of it is free for you to listen to. Or everything's free to listen to. Some of it's free to actually download. So FunkyDL remixes Nas, which is a project called Jazzmatic. There's a volume 1 and a volume 2. And then I think there's a volume where they're both volume 1 and 2 all together. And then the same with the FunkyDL samples. Amy Winehouse is Back to Frank, there's volume 1, and Back to Rap, there's volume 2. And those are free to download. There's also FunkyDL sample Stevie Wonder EP, called Sometimes I Have to Wonder, that's free to download. So there's a bunch of stuff. I think there's also an album called Remix Extraordinaire, something like that. That's a whole bunch of remixes of like American hip hop, from De La Soul to Big Daddy Kane. So there's a whole lot of free catalog for people to get off the Bandcamp as well.
You've been incredibly prolific over the years. But there is one more question I do want to ask you. I mean, obviously being an artist that was active in the 90s, up until obviously today, 2020, you've seen the evolution of the industry. So obviously
Mm.
from selling CDs, vinyls, up until the whole streaming era that we're in now. And how have you been able to navigate through all these changes over the years?
With great difficulty, in the sense that, you know, when it was vinyl and CD, I mean, any artist starting off is not going to have an easy ride unless you just become a smash sensation straight away. And so that was about building up a repertoire of releases and, you know, rotating these releases, doing it again and building up some fan bases until you can sell some solid units in places. And that lasted for a fair while until we got to around 2007. And then there started to become a decline in vinyl and CD sales. Um, by the time we got to 2008 and it was the world kind of recession, I mean, a lot of the vinyl stores, CD stores, chain stores were closing down, you know, and there was no Tower Records in the whole of America. And then the next thing you know, Virgin was out the door and HMV was out the door in America. Do you know what I mean? There's no chain stores whatsoever. And then it started to follow suit here, and it was just nuts. And so what happened was the download age was ushering in, you know, and so MySpace was about, and people had stuff online. You know, LimeWire was about a bit earlier, and people were figuring out how to download stuff, and there was all this file sharing, all of this kind of media share, and so people were finding ways to get what they wanted through downloading. But what was happening was people were finding out how to do that for free. Do you know what I'm saying? So you had all of this loss of revenue from vinyl and CD that wasn't being made up by download. And of course, the streaming hadn't quite kicked in yet around that time. It was probably about, but it wasn't, you know, the go-to thing for everyone. And so there was this kind of middle period where downloading was killing off so many people. And then, of course, you know, as time has gone on, streaming has become more and more of a thing because it means it alleviates storage and, you know, it's just that much more convenient. Do you know what I mean? We've gone through the phases where people had iPods and then lost the iPod and then you've lost all your music and so on and so forth. So yeah, all of those transitions were difficult because each time when a new one started, it wasn't something that you could just monetize straight away. And then when you did monetize it, it wasn't to the degree of how it was before. Do you know what I mean? So you just kind of had to learn how to build. Fortunately for me, I think one of the things that I learned was come around 2011. You know, vinyl for me was dead. CD was dead. Downloads were kind of kicking ass. Streaming hadn't taken off in the way that it is now. But what that meant for me was, okay, I need more releases. And I think where I started to win was when I started to usher in instrumental albums. Because I hadn't released instrumental albums until, 2011 is when like I really started to release instrumental albums. And I had built up so much music by then that I could just put out, you know, all of these instrumental albums. And that's what kind of helped to keep me alive in the kind of digital sphere, because these were all albums that weren't available physically. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I started to build on that and just keep going and be consistent and try and keep it to a high standard. And it helped to keep me alive through that kind of precarious time. So it was just about learning new ways. A good friend of mine said to me, DL, what you're going through, this is around 2010, so what you're going through is like Blockbuster Video. They're not coming back. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you're going to have to figure out what the new thing is and how to survive with the new thing, because you're not going to be able to rely on the old method again. So it was difficult.
And what is your thoughts on streaming, man? Do you find it, do you think it's a pro or a con right now in terms of earning from your music?
Okay, so the best way to answer that question would be it's a pro and a con depending on your situation. So someone like me, it's a pro. It's a pro. I mean, I wish I earned more per stream. I know a lot of artists would like more per stream. The reason why for me it isn't that bad is because I own all my material and I'm a solo artist. Do you know what I'm saying? So when an album of mine is streamed, or let's say across the span of a year, I think last year was around 10 million streams. 10 million streams on Spotify plus whatever I get on Apple or whatever. It equates to an amount of money that if you're not on a 50-50 split with a label, and all you've got is your distribution fees coming out of that at 15%, and then the rest is coming back solely to me, I can survive.
Okay.
But the moment I'm in a group of three of us, and we've got this independent label deal, which is a 50-50 split with the label, everyone in that situation is dead in the water.
Yeah.
So is streaming a pro or a con? It depends on your situation.
Man. So with 2020, man, this being the first album that you've released, obviously during our current situation, and not having the freedom of touring to push an album.
Yeah.
How has that affected your mindset in the release schedule?
Not to a great degree, because to be honest with you, I don't tour that much anyway. Do you know what I mean? I really don't. I used to very early on in my career. And then obviously the Japan thing took off, but I haven't toured Japan now. Last time I performed there was 2015. Okay. So I haven't been to Japan in the last 5 years. Do you know what I mean? I got an offer to go there in 2017, but I didn't really like the offer, so I declined it. But generally, I don't get that many offers to do shows. The good thing is when I do get offers, there are some really exotic places. Do you know what I mean? So, like, 2017, for example, I did a show in Wuhan, China, which is the first time I'd ever heard of Wuhan. So it's funny that now through all this virus, it's alleged that it started in Wuhan. But I went there in 2017 and did a show at this water park. Also in that year, I did a show in Georgia, the country, which I think borders Russia and Turkey. And then I did a show also in Madrid, Spain. And so I only did 3 shows that year. And those were the 3 shows, you know what I mean? And so I don't really get that many offers to do shows. I don't really do that many shows. I'm more studio based and studio focused. But when the offers for shows come in, they do end up being in some really nice places. The last show I actually did was in Austria about a year ago. Do you know what I mean? So I've never really been dependent on touring. You know, I've kind of been more focused on the studio stuff. And it's funny because I remember an artist came to see me and he said that he tours a lot. He does a lot of touring, but he doesn't do a lot of releasing. And he said to me, if he had an give me 1 second. Sorry, give me 1 second. Come back. Yeah. Let me answer that part again. So I was saying, so yeah, like I don't really rely on shows that much for when I'm releasing albums and promoting albums. Like it's more just studio based, man. And I think I'd love to do more shows. I think like last show I did was in Austria. It was a really, really good event, but the offers don't come that thick and fast, to be honest with you. And I'm not someone who goes out of my way to get show bookings, you know what I mean? Like I'll go where they book me, but at the same time, it's like, it's not something I'm dying to do. So it's few and far between. So it hasn't really impacted me because it's not like it was something I do wholeheartedly. I think what I was saying was that, I met this other artist and he was saying that he relies on shows and doesn't put out many releases. Whereas I'm the other way around. I put out all of these releases, but I don't really rely that much on shows. But what was interesting is that we both agreed that if we were to rely on the other one's respective, thing, we both kind of not have much going on. You know what I mean? So, but then for me, what's interesting about that is that it exemplifies that as an independent artist, it's not the same for everybody. Do you know what I mean? And that some people can win one way and some people can win another way.
Yeah, indeed, man. And that's a beautiful point to end on as well, man. So once again, I want to thank you so much for the music as well, because I mean some of your albums have been some of my favorite UK hip hop albums to listen to as well, man. A side note to that mixtape that you put out with DJ 279, which was about for the ladies. That was a
Okay.
dope project as well, man. Yeah, again, you know, on our platform, we obviously will continue to support all your output that you put out as well. Um, so yeah, so officially, Funky DL, and thank you so much for the conversation, for speaking to us,
Thank you,
joining
man.
us
Thank you.
for
Yeah.
episode 6 of Head to Head. And yeah, much love and much support for everything going forward as well, man.
Thank you very much, man. Hopefully, I can be gracing the airwaves and gracing everyone's ears with much more music to come, man. But I appreciate the interview. I've enjoyed this, man. Thank you very much.
Incredible, brother. All right, man. All the best. Take care.
Cool, man. Peace out.
Peace.